Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. Today we're out here in the desert and we are test driving the 2021 Ford Bronco Badlands with the Sasquatch package. Pretty exciting stuff, I think. So I'm going to show it to you inside and out. We're going to take it for a drive and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. Before we get out on the test drive, let's talk about this thing for a minute because this is my first opportunity to tell you about the Bronco, this particular Bronco, and generally what I think about this whole thing. Ford wanted to bring the Bronco back, and not the 70s and not the 80s Bronco, but the 60s Bronco in terms of style and retro theme. And I know a lot of people don't like that word retro, but you can't get away from it here, guys. Just look at the front of this thing. It's got the square fenders with the raised ridges, the flat hood. Look at the face. That is a face that only the 1960s could have hatched. And of course, this is a modern interpretation of it. LED headlights, LED daytime running lights. I love the white lettering across the grille that they've done here. And this one is set up with the modular steel front bumper. You can sort of mix and match on that as you wish. If you're modding this thing, you can put a winch on it a little bit easier. Down underneath that bumper, you can also see this thing's got full skid plates. The Sasquatch package really is the thing to talk about here. You can see the suspension. This has a fully upgraded suspension with Bilstein dampers. It also has a disconnecting front sway bar, lockers, front and rear, individually controllable. And look at these wheels and tires, man. These things are big ass tires. 35-inch 70R17 Goodyear tires. Those things are massive. I love them. The wheels that they're wrapped around too are pretty darn cool as well. B-lock capable wheels. Very Raptor-esque. And as we come down the side, you can see that this has larger fender flares as a result of all this. Now, one thing they've done here is they've given me a vehicle that's got a few battle wounds and scars. They called me the week before they gave it to me, and they were a little worried that it's got some, scrapes on the wheels, and the rock rails on this one also have a few little scars on the side, and even the rear fender flare on one side has some scrapes on it. Somebody's been having fun with this, as it should be. As it should be. Before we get around to the back, one little detail I want to point out here, and when I see these things, I just want to point them out because they intrigue me. Look at the way these mirrors sort of tie in design-wise to this cowl bar that comes across. As it comes out here to the mirror, this is a fixed mirror that's mounted to the cowl. It's not on the door. It does fold, but look at this. Look what they've done here. When you open the door, that comes all the way over and it stops just short of hitting the mirror. So just something I noticed, these things, little details. One of the options on our test Bronco is the removable hardtop, molded in color. This is the color magnetic, has a little bit of a metallic sheen to it. And this is removable in multiple sections. The two front pieces can be removed. The piece over the second row can be removed, and of course the rest of it can be removed. And it's actually not that difficult, at least over the first two rows. Just a few knobs and a few things and they're done. You can see a lot of seams in this thing, of course, which the Jeep doesn't show off quite as much, but I think this does contribute to some of the wind noise that we're going to hear when we're out on the drive. Looking at the back, spare tire mounted right in the center. You can see how big these tires are. On the top of it is the Chimsel, the center high mounted stoplight. And in the center of the wheel, on the little hub piece there, you can see they've actually mounted the rear camera there. Not the first time we've seen that, but it is kind of a cool little detail. This gate does swing open from one side, and then the hatch opens up independently. LED taillights. The rear bumper on this is a steel bumper, and below that on our tester, you can see this does have the tow package with the 7-pin connector, and the exhaust pipe dumps out on the passenger side just below that bumper. On the end caps, you can see this also has a slightly larger finish piece to account for these wider fender flares on the Sasquatch. The interior of the Bronco is a place that I think that Ford really spent some time and design effort. They really listened to people, probably Ford owners, probably Jeep owners. They customer clinicked the heck out of this interior because having just reviewed a Jeep Wrangler last week, the chief competitor here, I can tell you that they've taken every little thing that you can complain about in the Jeep Wrangler interior and they've improved upon it. When we look at the overall design and the theme and the look and feel of this interior, Ford didn't really hold retro hostage here. They went modern, they went gear. If you spend time in Bass Pro Shops, REI, Home Depot, you're going to feel right at home in this interior, from the way everything's laid out, from the utilitarian items like this grab handle down here that my partner says he thinks it looks like it came right off of a chainsaw. And he's right. There's grab handles and all of the grips and rubber and materials in here. The switch gear, everything just speaks to camping and active living and the whole nine. They've really got the full palette here. And the full palette here includes these rubber floors that have drains front and rear that you can actually hose this interior out. And I can hear the people now. I've heard this all my life. Just give us something plain without all the shit on it. It's got a hose out interior. Well, Ford gave it to you. This one's got a lot of shit on it, but you can get one without it. It's got the hose out interior that you've been begging for. So there you go. Now the seats here, even though we are up in the close to $60,000 range, these are vinyl seats. They are comfortable. They look good. They've got the Bronco emblem embossed orange stitching that kind of goes along with these other orange accents in here. And like the Jeep Wrangler, you do sit very upright here with an upright dash, although it does feel a lot more roomy and a little bit more, I don't know, comfortable is a word that's really easy to throw out there. The steering wheel is actually a very nice unit. A lot of Fords, you know, I've gotten used to their Ford steering wheels, but this one's kind of a new design that I haven't seen before. All of the switches on it are kind of like this rubbery material that's very high quality feeling. It looks good. It's very futuristic. Has the Bronco logo right in the middle. The instrument cluster ahead of me is sort of an interesting design. It has a traditional dial to the left and a big digital screen in the center that lets you customize just about anything that you want to put on it. And over in the center is a large touchscreen infotainment system. One thing this does have that I like is up here at the top of the dash, they've put the switch bank for almost all of your four-wheel drive traction toys, the disconnecting sway bar, the lockers front and rear, and a number of other things that you need are right up there in plain view and easy to get to. Down on the center console, you can see down here there's a place to put your phone. This one has a wireless charger in there, USB ports, traditional gear shift lever, big cup holders, and right behind the gear shift lever is the GOAT modes. They love that marketing lingo, but this is your shift indicator for the transfer case for 2 high, 4 low, 4 automatic, and then in the center you can hit that drive mode button and it'll take you. It's got a nice quality feel to it, and very similar to the Jeep, the switches for the windows are on the center console, only here down below, and then your mirror controls over here. Storage in here, a little bit bigger than a square tissue box, as you can see down there. It's you could definitely put a tissue box in there and still have room for a few other things. Good storage there, and the height is very good as well. Up here at the top, auxiliary switches for all the accessories you could ever want. And there is a separate fuse box for all of those so that you don't have to run wiring anywhere. You can just connect to it right there. Another thing I want to point out here is this does have the removable panels and the removable hardtop. 2 panels here, another panel on the second row. One nice detail here is that these are actually lined with a bit of a carpet headliner for sound deadening, as well as just something to have there. And Jeep charges you extra for that on the Wrangler. They give you a plain plastic one, but here that comes with a built-in headliner. Kind of a nice touch. The rear seat of the Bronco is a place that's very similar to the Jeep Wrangler in that you know you're in a bit more of a compact situation. Your distances to spread out are a little bit less, although this does feel roomier than the Wrangler because you don't have that big crossbar right in front of your face with the speakers on it. And with the tops removed, you've got a full opening around you. As far as space goes, you can see that with these seats set for my height, about 5'9" with my boots on, I've got pretty good knee room. I've got about 3 inches ahead of my knees. My seating height, very similar to the Wrangler. I am pretty high off the floor, yet my knees are still perched up just a little bit. I feel like I'm kind of scrunched up just a tad. Headroom is pretty good, even with this removable hardtop. I've got about 3 to 4 inches above my head, so I actually could wear a cowboy hat in here, I think. These seats do fold down in a 60-40 split. Now, you don't get a completely flat load floor. There is a bit of a step up there, but they do fold down quite easily, and they do have a slight back rake adjustment. Down here on the center console, no vents back here. I was a little surprised about that, especially given the price point that we're at. You do have controls for the windows, you do have an AC outlet, and you do have a USB port. But again, surprising I don't have AC vents back here. When it comes to rating this interior, there are a lot of great design elements going on. They've done a good job designing it. It's comfortable. It looks good. It works well. There's a lot of opportunity for modding your Bronco. Versatility, much better than the Wrangler. There's a place to put your phone. You can see it. There's just a lot of detail in here that they've really spent a lot of time with. What they could have spent a little more time with, though, is adding some quality. This is all hard plastic, literally everywhere you put your hand, and lots of squeaks and rattles, as we'll find out here as we get out on the drive. The dash, the hardtop, the seats, everything in this thing shudders, rattles, and creaks. Just amazing, amazing. So that's an area where I think they can sharpen their pencil. This interior gets 4 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is the top of the line with the large screen Sync 4 touchscreen infotainment system. Sync 3, Sync 4 are systems I have rated pretty highly in most of my automotive travels, and this is no different. It is fully featured. The menus are very well laid out, and you can have this either white or dark. And you can see that flipping around here, navigating is very easily done. I like the way it's laid out here at the moment with a little side screen for navigation and then the main screen for all of your infotainment information. The sound system is great. With the cameras, you get some good views going on with that. It is a little bit slow when you go to use it sometimes. Sometimes it's like a computer. Sometimes it gets a little bit hung up and it locks up and you got to wait for it to kind of think itself through. But beyond that, this is a good system that I've been happy with in almost every Ford I've tested it in. It gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, we're going to start out on the trail here in the desert and just get right into what this thing's all about. Now, I'm not going to do hardcore off-roading today. We're not crawling over rocks or going up hills. And in fact, we're not even going to be in four-wheel drive. We're out here on one of my more rugged trails that I like to test vehicles on to see how well put together this thing is, how the suspension is tuned, and how this thing really feels to drive around out here in the rough stuff. And so because this does have the top suspension, one of the things that it has is a disconnecting sway bar, which if you're really going into situations where you need some articulation, you can disconnect the sway bar so it allows a lot more roll and therefore articulation. With the off-road suspension this has Bilstein dampers, not the same Fox Shocks type of setup that you see on the Ford Raptor, for instance. Those are a lot softer, a little more forgiving. These are pretty stiff, actually. I will say that this thing does kind of beat you up out here on the rougher roads, a little more than I expected, if I'm honest. The maneuverability is very good, however. The steering's got a nice weighting to it, and because of the wheelbase and short overhangs this has, turning around in tight spots and getting through some of those tight areas quite easy. Out here at speed on my favorite desert washboard road, woo! The first thing I'm noticing out here on this gravel road is the fact that these nice big tires really have some bite. That's a good thing if you really go out and do this thing quite a bit. Now, this chassis, as I mentioned, pretty stiffly sprung, and the damper is pretty tight, and because of that, this does have a stiffer ride out here when you start getting up to speed. But the payoff for that is a little bit of a better handling characteristic when you start throwing it into curves at higher speeds. And I will say that the stability control on this actually does a pretty good job of arresting this thing trying to slide out on you on the corners. You get just a little bit, just enough to feel, but it's not letting the thing completely go out of control, at least within reason. Coming around this corner here, whoo, yeah, just a little bit. The chassis itself is pretty tight. I'm not getting rattling in the suspension or rattling in the steering. That part's good. Where I am getting quite a bit of shudder and rattle is in this structure, and I mentioned that a little bit out there on the trail. I'm getting a lot of rattling in the dash. The dash is bouncing up and down, and this hardtop just really has a lot of squeaks and creaks. And the doors, these frameless windows tend to rattle around quite a bit when the vibration really starts getting to a fever pitch. So, well, I think they've done a good job in getting this chassis really tight and bolted together and buttoned down. I think that the structure is really where that tends to be a weakness. But the sad part about all of this is, while this thing performs exceptionally well off the road in many ways, as we just discovered, on the pavements where most people are going to be, the handling experience on the pavement is one that I actually find a little bit better than the Jeep Wrangler, and that's because the suspension, as we've already established, is tighter and more firmly sprung. So the payoff that brings, even though it's a bit more of a rough ride off the road, is it gives you handling on the pavement around town that's definitely more nimble and agile than what you're going to get in the Wrangler. It's a more confidence-inspiring ride when you're at speed on the highway, when you want to change lanes or put some power to this thing. You're not going to get those white-knuckle moments when you get this thing up to, 75, 80 miles an hour passing on the freeway. And when you go to throw it into a corner, this thing actually has a pretty good level of grip in spite of these off-road tread tires. Now, these tires do make a little bit of noise, but they're not super noisy like a lot of aftermarket ones. You can hear them when you're going down the freeway at speed. Overall, though, this chassis I find, for the most part, very impressive. Its strengths are on the pavement. It handles tighter, it's more agile. It definitely has a more sporting feel than the Wrangler on the pavement. Off the road, a lot rougher than the Wrangler. It tends to give you and the structure of this vehicle a little bit rougher ride. Overall, chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. Now we got to talk about powertrain, and the most important question I always like to ask is, how does it go? It's got a nice sound, and 60. All right, so actually this 2.7 liter twin turbocharged EcoBoost engine does a really good job of moving this thing, and this 10-speed automatic transmission does an equally good job of putting that power out in spite of the pretty substantial curb weight this thing has. It's rated at 330 horsepower and 415 pound-feet of torque when you use premium fuel. Now, if you go with regular fuel, which you can, those horsepower numbers do drop down just a little bit. This is rated by the EPA at 17 city, 17 highway, and 17 combined. One of the ways it gets there is that it has an auto start stop system. There it goes. And I hate that. I hate it. So I usually turn it off. I've got it on right now. It's especially annoying when you're off-road and you're stopping and maneuvering, and the things, it's just, the air conditioner goes like a gym sock. Yuck. Okay, just don't like it. There is an off switch, but it defaults to on every time you start the car. A couple of notes with this powertrain during the week is that it does tend to be a little bit noisier and less refined in this vehicle than I've noticed it to be in F-150s I've driven, as well as other vehicles that I found this engine in with Ford. It's a great motor, it's got plenty of power, but here, I don't know if they have less sound deadening or what, but it does tend to be a little bit less refined in that way. Good news is when you step on it, it gives you the power. Woo. Now that I'm using all that power and kind of enjoying it, I will say that fuel economy at 17 isn't, most people aren't buying this vehicle for that. It's not the best in the world, but it is exactly what I got with it this week in both city and highway driving, 17, and a little bit off-roading too. So at least it meets what those expectations are. So this powertrain could use a little bit more refinement, but it's a nice ally out there on the trail. This powertrain gets 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, my friends, now it's time to talk about value and competitiveness here. And look, I've read the forums. I know a lot of people out there in Bronco land don't really think that we should be comparing this to the Jeep Wrangler. They think, oh no, this is different. This is a different horse of a different color. Horse. It's the same thing, okay? In form and function, when you're out there in the shopping market, it's the same thing. It has the same overall function and form, whether you like it or not. It just is. So that's who I'm really comparing this thing to in terms of value and all of the little things we talked about. Jeep Wrangler, this has some things over the Jeep Wrangler, I think, no question about it. Definitely has a lot of, new thinking going on in terms of its design and execution, but there's still a few areas I think that the Wrangler does better, especially when it comes to off-road handling and comfort. in the ability to do some of the things without beating yourself to death. This, just the way this is designed and set up, tends to be a little bit more of a rough edge machine. Not a bad thing. Some people like that. I happen to like the kind of the roly-poly off-road rubbery, just the Wrangler's just more comfortable off-road if you're really getting into it, I think. Into the weeds. We talked about that when we were off-road. That said, I look at the price here, $58,000 and some change. I think when you look at a Rubicon in the way of a Wrangler, you're going to see a few more things on the Rubicon, maybe like leather seats. I still have vinyl here, but I do like the fact that we have the rubber floors and the hose out capability. People have been begging for that for a long time. Ford's given it to us, even at this price. But this does have a better infotainment system than anything from Jeep. So there's a lot of ways that you can compare these things depending on what you're looking for. I think at the price, the biggest bang for the buck here is the Sasquatch package. No matter which Bronco you get, I highly recommend you option that, because if you're going to put up with all the trade-offs that you get going into an SUV like this, the handling, the efficiency, maybe the comfort, parking, all of the stuff that daily life gets sort of compromised with when you go into something that's big and brawny like this, go for the Sasquatch package. At least get what you pay for. At least get what you're giving it up for. And they offer it all the way up and down the line. I think that's great. The price for it's pretty good too. So when I look at how all of this thing stacks up, warranty coverage, class average, quality, that's the one area I really think Ford could sharpen their pencil here. Lots and lots of rattles and squeaks. I mean, ouch. This thing was like driving around in a rattle box all this week. Especially when we get off-road, this thing really comes alive in a way that's not a good thing. And yes, this is a pre-production model, but I've read the forums. There's a lot of people with early production models that are complaining about the same stuff. And there were quite a few little things that didn't quite work right here, that this kind of led me to think that they can sharpen their pencil a little bit. So overall, I put value at 4 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 4 stars for the review. Pretty good. Very good. I like it. I like it a lot. If I were looking at this or a Wrangler, I would honestly have a tough time, you know, what am I going to do with that? I will say that I love this color. I ordered this color on my new Ford Maverick that's on the way, and I wish I could put these tires, these nice huge tires and wheels on the Maverick, but they won't fit. Nonetheless, there you go. So if you like the video you just saw, see my latest one right there. Better yet, click down there on that big round logo and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Either way, stay tuned.